Briatore's verdict, the price he finally paid. Flavio Briatore spent 2 decades building one of the most formidable careers in Formula One management. He developed world champions, rebuilt struggling teams, and accumulated influence that few people in the sport, driver or otherwise, have ever matched. In September 2008, he ordered a driver to crash deliberately during a race. The plan worked. It was not discovered for 11 months. And what followed? The ban, the court fight, the return, tells you more about how Formula One actually operates than any championship season ever could. Briatore was born in 1950 in Verzuolo, a small town in northern Italy's Piedmont region. His father ran a hardware store. He had no motorsport background, no engineering training, and no connections to the racing world. Through the late 1970s and early 1980s, he sold financial products and managed Benetton clothing franchises across North America. Luciano Benetton noticed him and, in 1988, handed him control of Benetton Formula, the family's Formula One operation. Briatore had never managed a racing team. That did not slow him. Within 2 years, Benetton was competitive. He restructured the organization, secured sponsorship, and made the personnel decisions that teams at the front of the grid require. When Michael Schumacher was spotted testing with Jordan in 1991, Briatore moved immediately to sign him. Schumacher won the World Championship with Benetton in 1994. Then again in 1995. When Schumacher left for Ferrari, Briatore rebuilt. The team transitioned into Renault. He signed Fernando Alonso, a young Spaniard from Asturias with exceptional technical precision and the kind of competitive hunger that suited Briatore's environment exactly. Under Briatore's management, Alonso won the World Championship in 2005. Then again in 2006. 2 drivers, 4 championships, 1 team principal. By 2008, Briatore was the most powerful non-driver figure in the paddock. He held a stake in Queen's Park Rangers. He ran Billionaire, his chain of luxury nightclubs and restaurants, venues built on exclusivity, spectacle, and the projection of untouchable status. He moved through Formula One in the same register. The results over 15 years had made that posture difficult to challenge. The 2008 Singapore Grand Prix was held on September 28th. It was the first Formula One race conducted at night. On a street circuit running through the city's financial district, floodlights illuminated the Marina Bay circuit as it wound past colonial buildings, elevated sections, and glass towers. Fernando Alonso qualified 15th. For a driver of his standing in a car capable of competing at the front of the grid, that was an anomaly. On a tight street circuit like Singapore, where overtaking is severely limited and track position is decisive, the statistical probability of winning from 15th without a major external disruption is, in practical terms, near zero. The fuel load in his car made the situation more specific. Renault had fueled Alonso light, a decision that carried no strategic logic unless a safety car period emerged at a precise, narrow point in the race, enabling Alonso to pit early, refuel, and rejoin ahead of drivers who had not yet stopped. That window was lap 14. Alonso was a 2-time world champion. He knew that car. He knew that fuel load. He had been through enough pre-race strategy briefings to understand what a light fuel load from 15th place required in order to work. What he said, or did not say, about that before the lights went out in Singapore has never been established by any formal investigation. On lap 14, Nelson Piquet Jr. drove into the barriers at turn 17. Piquet Jr. was 23 years old. He was in his first full Formula One season, driving for the team that controlled his career and his future in the sport. The impact looked wrong to observers on the pit wall, too controlled, the angle inconsistent with a mechanical failure or a loss of grip. A crash, technically. But not the right kind of crash. The safety car deployed. Alonso pitted. When the field cycled through the safety car period, he was leading. He won the race. The paddock called it a strategic masterclass. Alonso took the trophy. The story held. For 11 months it held. Then Renault dropped Piquet Jr. from his race seat. In August 2009, he submitted a detailed statement to the FIA. The crash had been deliberate. It had been agreed upon before the race. Briatore had authorized it. Pat Siemens, Renault's executive director of engineering, had coordinated it. Piquet had been instructed to drive his car into a concrete wall at racing speed on a floodlit street circuit. surrounded by barriers and infrastructure at the precise lap required to benefit his teammate, not for a championship, not for a points lead in a title fight. Some for one race in September, in Singapore. Piquet was the instrument. He was 23. He followed orders. Alonso was not implicated. No evidence connected him to prior knowledge of the arrangement, and no investigation since has altered that finding. He has maintained his innocence throughout, and the legal and factual record supports that position. It does not resolve every question the situation raises, but it is the record that exists. For Briatore and Simons, the FIA assembled testimony, internal communications, and a timeline that aligned with Piquet's account with precision. The affair was named Crashgate. The World Motorsport Council convened on September 21, 2009. Renault, as a constructor, received a 2-year suspended ban. Their cooperation with the investigation was formally noted, and they remained in the sport. See, Pat Simons received a 5-year ban from FIA-regulated motorsport. Flavio Briatore received a lifetime ban, permanent exclusion from Formula One and any championship under FIA jurisdiction. He rejected it the same day. He described the proceedings as illegitimate, denied personal culpability, and filed legal action in a French civil court within days. His argument was procedural. The FIA had no authority to sanction him as a private individual because he held no FIA competition license. In 2010, the French court agreed. The ban was annulled on jurisdictional grounds. The ruling addressed the mechanism of the sanction, not its basis. Briatore's lifetime ban had lasted 164 days. That number is worth holding. The FIA imposed permanent exclusion from the sport for orchestrating a deliberate crash. A French civil court, ruling on questions of organizational jurisdiction rather than the facts of the Singapore race, removed that sanction after 5 months and 12 days. The FIA's findings were not challenged. The timeline was not disputed. The procedural argument succeeded. 164 days. Then the door reopened. Meanwhile, Piquet Jr. never started another Formula One race. His career in the sport ended in 2009, at the age of 24, with 28 starts and 0 wins. He moved to other series. His Formula One chapter closed at the moment he became useful to the FIA's investigation, and ceased the moment that usefulness expired. The Renault Works team during the same period was sold, rebranded as Lotus, reverted to the Renault name, and eventually became Alpine. The infrastructure Briatore had built was restructured throughout. His formal ban dissolved into the courts, while the team he had run was dismantled around him. When Alpine approached Briatore in late 2023, the team was in genuine difficulty. Results had deteriorated substantially. Internal structures were reported by those inside the organization as fragmented and poorly coordinated. Renault Group needed a decisive intervention, and they chose Briatore. He returned initially in an advisory capacity. By 2024, he was functioning as the team's executive authority, restructuring operations, directing personnel decisions, and exercising the kind of control that in any previous chapter of his career would have carried the formal title of team principal. What followed inside Alpine was significant. During the period surrounding Briatore's return, the majority of the team's senior leadership was replaced or departed. Across the technical, commercial, and operational structure, the scale of the turnover was substantial. An organizational reset conducted at speed, under a man who had returned to a sport that had once banned him for life. The paddock's response was not uniformly quiet. Toto Wolff said publicly that the appointment raised questions he found difficult to reconcile with Formula One's stated values. Christian Horner noted that Briatore was someone who knew how to get results, a remark that invited more than one reading. Former drivers who had competed in Singapore in 2008 were asked about the appointment in interviews and largely declined to engage at length. That restraint communicated something in itself. Others within the sport framed it in practical terms. Briatore's legal status was clear. Alpine required experienced leadership. The organization had been underperforming against its budget for several seasons. Pragmatism, in this reading, outweighed symbolism. Briatore re-entered the paddock without public acknowledgement of the Crashgate affair. No statement, no qualification. He arrived and began issuing instructions. It is worth considering the full picture that period produced. Piquet Jr., who executed the plan and cooperated with the investigation, ended his Formula One career at 24 and never returned. Briatore, who authorized the plan, had his lifetime ban dissolved after 164 days and was eventually handed control of a team operating on a budget exceeding 200 million euros annually. That disparity is not an editorial judgment, it is a factual summary of outcomes. Before Singapore, Briatore's management record placed him, objectively on results, alongside the small group of figures who had shaped Formula One across eras. 4 championships, 2 drivers, 2 decades of front-running organization. Very few people in the sport's history can point to that record. It still exists. It is now permanently qualified by what he chose to do in Singapore to produce one additional result. The contrast is specific. On one side of his career, the billionaire venues, the championship trophies, the paddock authority built across 30 years, the curated image of a man who operated above the ordinary constraints of the sport. On the other, a 23-year-old driver steering a Formula One car into a concrete wall at racing speed on the instruction of that same man at that same level of the sport to manufacture a safety car period that would have been operationally invisible had Piquet kept quiet. That is the full frame of Flavio Briatore, not one or the other, both simultaneously. Every assessment of his career now requires that accounting. Every recognition of the championships carries the question the record cannot definitively answer. How much of what he built was built entirely within the rules? The question is not resolvable. It is permanent. The FIA's findings were not overturned on substance. The French court ruled on procedure. Piquet's testimony has not been credibly contradicted. The race result stands in the record books. Briatore proved something about Formula One that the sport has not fully confronted. You do not need to be innocent to be indispensable. You need to win. And when you have won enough, when the championships are real, the talent identification was genuine, and the organizational capability was demonstrably there, the sport will construct a path back to you. That is not a judgment unique to Formula One. It is a description of how institutions in high-performance industries ultimately weigh accountability against utility. Briatore understood that calculus before anyone asked him to demonstrate it. He is still in the paddock, still managing, still operating with the certainty of someone whose self-assessment has not been updated in 3 decades. The record of the FIA's investigation sits in the formal archives of the sport. The drivers, who started in Singapore on September 28, 2008, have not forgotten what happened on lap 14. The engineers who read the pre-race fuel data, who looked at the qualifying position, who understood what that strategy required in order to function. They know what it implied, and they know it was not discovered by accident. Briatore authorized a plan that required a 23-year-old driver to crash his car at racing speed into a concrete wall in order to move a needle on a race result. The man who gave that instruction received a lifetime ban that lasted 164 days. The man who executed it never raced in Formula One again. Those are the facts. The verdict they produce does not require a narrator to announce it. In Formula One, you can survive almost anything. What you cannot do is make anyone forget. If you follow Formula One closely, the governance questions, the accountability gaps, the decisions the sport makes about who belongs in it, subscribe for continued coverage. New videos weekly. The question of whether Briatore's return to Alpine was appropriate, given the specific and documented circumstances of his departure, is one worth your view in the comments.